A late-night military strike exposes some of the secret weapons the U.S. has in its arsenal. And then we take a look at a very interesting take on the entire world of the paranormal and the world of ghosts. If a deaf person dies, is their ghost deaf in the afterlife? Today on Dead Rabbit Radio. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Dead Rabbit Radio. I'm your host, Jason Carpenter. I'm having a great day. I hope you guys are having a great day too. I hope you guys are having tons of fun doing whatever you're doing. We got a lot of stuff to cover today. So first off, running into Dead Rabbit Radio Command, everyone get on your feet and give it up for Sovereign. Woohoo, yeah, Sovereign's running on in, dressed in all of his military gear. He's giving us all salutes. We have to stop clapping real quick to salute him, and then we clap again. Sovereign, I don't know if Sovereign's in the military, but I do play Battlefield 6 with Sovereign online. And Sovereign posted, the longtime supporter of the show, Sovereign, but also Sovereign posted their Spotify Wrapped, spreading the word that they love and listen to Dead Rabbit Radio. That is why Sovereign is going to get a shout out this episode. Sovereign is our captain, our pilot. If you guys can't support the show financially, do what Sovereign did. Not buy Battlefield 6 and play with me, although that's totally acceptable too. Just spread the word about the show. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell everyone you know. Dead Rabbit Radio is your favorite paranormal show. That is how you can help the show grow. Sovereign, you ready to fly us out? Because we're actually going into an active war zone. The beginning of this story, you thought you were just going to hear a relaxing story about the recently deceased haunting the living. Maybe later. But first off, get your guns ready, put on your camouflage pants, make sure you have a lot of Gatorade to replace those electrolytes lost in battle. Everyone climb on board the Bunny battleship as Sovereign captains us out of Dead Rabbit Radio Command all the way down to Venezuela. What is a battleship? What does a battleship sound like? I'm sure they have a foghorn, and then it can do cannon explosions. I think battleships probably don't make a lot of noise, so you can't find them, right? It'd be really easy to shoot at stuff if you could hear it coming. I doubt it has a foghorn. They're like, oh, there's an enemy submarine. Sound the foghorn. Wah, wah. This is a crazy story, and I'm sure you guys are all aware of the big picture of what happened in Venezuela. But just in the past few days, we're getting more reports that some of the technology that was used in the arrest of Nicolás Maduro, he was the president of Venezuela, that the U.S. scooped up one night. It was January 3rd. He was just kicking it as president of Venezuela when all of a sudden the United States decided to, I guess there was a $25 million bounty put out for him. And they're like, hey, we could use the money. The U.S. was like, oh yeah, we could totally use $25 million. Let's go get him. They attacked Caracas. They attacked the capital of Venezuela and arrested him, which in and of itself, just the basic details were already kind of wacky. I'm sure you guys know a lot of the broad parts of the story. It was basically that we went in and snatched him and his wife out, and now he's like in the same jail. If I remember correctly, he's in the same jail where P. Diddy and Luigi Mangione are. Now, whether or not any of that's true, right, the courts will decide. I don't know if he's a narco-terrorist. I honestly didn't really follow him until recently. When it's just, you can't avoid it, right? You're like, what? What happened? This president got arrested? So they did. Apparently he was running around his house because obviously he knew this had been, they've been talking about it for a while. Trump just kept saying, turn yourself in, turn yourself in. He's like, no, I'm a president of a country. Like, what are you going to do? Arrest me? Well, yeah, they sent in all of these special forces teams. And apparently at the end of it, him and his wife were running through their house, and there's a giant vault. It's a giant safe room, these huge thick doors. And the goal was, we'll get in there, right? Just hide from them. And the special forces teams knew this. They actually had detailed floor plans of his residence. So the special forces teams, they had the ones who were, because they hit multiple targets at once, right? Obviously, you had to shut down communications. You had to shut down the military's ability to respond. That's the story we're really going to focus on, because some weird weaponry apparently took place there. But then the team that actually stormed his house, they had their guns like normal soldiers, but they also had heavy-duty blowtorches. Because they knew there was a giant vault in there. I mean, it would suck to do this whole operation and you're just 3 seconds too late, the door shuts and they're all, oh man. So they were going to melt their way into the vault. But they didn't have to, actually. Apparently, Maduro and his wife were just a little too slow to get there. And as the door was shutting, the soldiers just, like, stopped the door. They're like, no. And Nicholas was oh, okay. I mean, this is the last place that I could possibly have hidden. And his eyes go from side to side. They don't know about the secret escape tunnel I've already built in Rikers. They got him and they arrested him. So all of that stuff is already interesting enough. We have a plane. None of this is super surprising, but at the same time, it's kind of shocking that we know this now. We have a plane that basically shut down all communications coming in and out of Caracas. Special forces dropped in. But what's come about recently? This has been going around Twitter. It's an interview with one of the soldiers who was on the ground, a Venezuelan soldier, and it technically is like a militia. They have a group. They have like basically these groups called the Collectives, which is kind of like it seems like a militia type group in Venezuela. It might be more official than that, but basically they are armed. They are part of the military wing of Venezuela, but I don't think it's actually like a soldier, like you're trained and you have the ranks and all that stuff, but I could be wrong. Because we're dealing with a lot of stuff that is in Spanish, and I'm looking at these translations. So but we'll just, for sake of ease, call him a soldier. This soldier has recently done an interview who was on the ground. He was at a military base in Caracas, and he told what he experienced and his fellow soldiers experienced during this battle. He said, listen, dude, there is no way I'm ever fighting the United States ever again. There's just absolutely no way I'm doing it. Here's the thing, too. When I read this, it does smack of propaganda. That's why I really wanted to try to find more information on it, and I think that I have, but we'll present it the way the mainstream media is presenting it. He goes, I'm never fighting America again, and I'm going to tell you guys out there, no one else should do it either. Because what I saw happen that night, I still can't wrap my head around. He goes, listen, dude, we were just chilling at this military base. Not a care in the world. When all of a sudden these helicopters showed up and around 20 U.S. soldiers dropped out of the helicopters and laid siege to the base. And, well, actually, back up. This was interesting, too. This is kind of the start of this fancy tech. He goes, these helicopters were flying. We knew they weren't ours. This is before the U.S. soldiers land. He goes, we knew we were under attack. He goes, I watched one of my fellow soldiers get a Russian-made shoulder-launched missile, like a Javelin or something like that, equivalent of American. It was some sort of shoulder-launched anti-air missile. All of the equipment they had, they purchased from China and Russia, which is also, not a great advertisement for any of their stuff. But he goes, one of my guys, I saw this guy grab an anti-aircraft rocket launcher and shoot down one of these helicopters. They knew they weren't theirs. He goes, the guy pulled the trigger and blew up. And a couple other guys blew up who were standing close enough to this dude. So that's either one or two things going on there. That's really bad Russian technology. Little to no quality assurance on these things. Or, most likely, with this story's details, the U.S. has technology that can basically cause weapons to misfire. It is either a poorly designed anti-air missile, or we have some way to jam them to the point that they just blow up. Hello, this is Jason from the future here. I need to make a little addition to this part. I said there was two possible options. Bad engineering, or we have some sort of kill switch for enemy equipment. There actually is a third option, and I had kind of been racking my brain a lot over this. It's been a day or two since I recorded this episode, and I kept going through the translations, because, obviously there's multiple translations of the story. There's audio translations and text translations and all that stuff. there's the possibility that what happened was it would appear to have been completely random. I mean, outside of the fact that you're in a war zone and stuff blows up, but what actually might have happened is there was a drone, a US drone nearby, that actually picked up the signature of this shoulder-launched missile. It's like a manipad. And either immediately after he fired it, the dude blew up, or a short while afterwards, like very short, a couple minutes maybe, the dude blew up. Because looking at all these translations, it does sound like he pulled the trigger and he blew up. But digging more into it, officially, we don't have that technology. We don't have that technology that'll actually cause enemy weapons to blow up. I mean, that's kind of what we're talking about here, weird technology. But even his own statement, it's not 100% that the guy pulled the trigger and then blew up. Like, how do you take that? What we do know, what we have, because we've seen it in other theaters of war as well, is drones can pick up infrared signatures of weapons being fired, and if the drone is close enough, it can drop a bomb so rapidly that it feels like it knew you pulled the trigger before you pulled the trigger. If the drone was like 3 seconds away from you anyways, and it detected that launch, you fire the weapon and blow up almost perfectly in sync. It would be a chicken and an egg thing. So that is possibly what happened. For the rest of the segment, I'll keep talking about my misfire theory, and it could be that. But what actually it looks like happened was it was some sort of detecting technology on a drone that right after he pulled the trigger, he blew up. And a bunch of people standing next to him blew up as well. One of the translations described it as they returned to meat and bones. Such a brutal blast. But for the rest of the episode, I'll talk about my misfire theory, but I wanted to give that third option because that is most likely what happened. And even that would appear almost supernatural. You pull a trigger and a second later, you blow up because the drone knew you pulled the trigger. It would almost feel like it knew you were going to pull the trigger. It knew where you were before you even opened fire. Crazy stuff. Let's continue with the episode. If you saw that happen, you're not gonna... You see 3 other anti-air rocket shoulder-launched missiles there. Oh, you're not gonna try it, because either it was a glitch, and that's bad enough, or it doesn't matter. You pull the trigger, you're gonna blow up. There's some sort of jammy technology. Well, anyways, then the 20 dudes enter the base, the 20 U.S. soldiers, and this soldier says, I've never... Like, it's interesting. The way he talks about them is the way that people talk in alien invasion movies. Here's one of the quotes that was posted. Quote, "We had no way to compete with their technology, with their weapons. I swear I've never seen anything like it. We couldn't even..." Oh, I don't want to give that to... That's a spoiler, but basically, he talks about there's just nothing you can do to stop these guys. They're using technology that you didn't even know existed, including the one I almost spoiled for you guys. But anyways, he goes, they landed, and they begin picking us off with pinpoint precision. He goes, I'd never seen training like that. He goes, we were firing back. We were trying to defend ourselves and defend our country, but they were just, bodies were dropping on our side. He goes, none of them got injured. As far as he could see, he goes, we didn't hit a single one of them. He said the training, that's why it kind of does smack like a little bit of propaganda. He's like, the training, they were so handsome as well. Tall, with blonde hair, blonde flowing hair. They all look like Fabio. He goes, they were just picking us off. That dude just blew up because he pulled the trigger of his own weapon. You're like, what is going on here? And just when he thought things couldn't get worse, he goes, these soldiers, they killed... It's interesting because, again, there's translation issues and sourcing issues. We'll finish off on that, but this guy says somewhere between 100 to 200 people were just eaten alive by these special forces. They were just killing them. There's nothing we could do. Which is interesting because I haven't really heard a full body count come out of Caracas yet. It has been very focused on the president. They did lose their president, so the bookkeeping thing, I can understand. They'll probably finally get a death toll out of that. Unfortunately, some civilians were killed as well. But he goes, they're shooting and people are dropping. That guy's missile launcher exploded. We don't know what to do. And then he goes, I've never even thought this was a possibility. I didn't even know this was a real thing. He goes, we're trying to fight back when all of a sudden my ears started bleeding. And he says that the U.S. soldiers unleashed a sonic weapon on them. He says it was just this noise. This noise, my ears started bleeding. A bunch of our ears started bleeding. And we completely lost the physical ability to fight. And that was, there's very few situations where if your ears were bleeding, you'd go, okay, I can deal with this. And this would be one of them, because he goes, my ears were bleeding, other soldiers on our side ears were bleeding, but I watched men fall to their knees as they began vomiting up blood. So at that point, you would be like, I'll take the ear bleed. I'll take the ear bleed, I'm okay. You okay? Blah! Vomiting up blood. And he goes, that was the end of the fight. We were done. And this was just the military base. This is the account of one soldier from one military base during this nighttime raid. What's interesting about this, on the one hand, it really does smack of propaganda. What's interesting is that it was tweeted out, and this kind of reinforces the propaganda angle, but we'll get into the source of it. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, she posted it on Twitter. She retweeted this account. And this account originally came from let me pull this up here, a man named Mike Netter. He posted this, and then it got reposted by Caroline Leavitt, and then it started going into the media, the mainstream media covering it. I originally read this on the Daily Express, the U.S. website. But of course I wanted to know, is this true? We read so much stuff from Real Raw News, and you can't just say, a guard told me. I mean, you could, but how believable is that? I really wanted to get more information about this, so I was able to look around, and this is apparently real. There was a Spanish language channel called Castro Oconda News who posted this and said, this has gone viral. This is a Spanish language video, and it's talking about what happened in Caracas. And this is amazing. I didn't know YouTube did this. I was able to listen to the interview. It was auto-dubbed into English for me. And most of it does match up. I didn't find any huge disparities. Really, it came down to, at one point in the audio interview where you can actually hear the soldier being interviewed. See, it's hard for me to tell the difference between the soldier and the interviewer because it's auto-dubbed. So it's just like one flat voice over all of it. At one point, he says 100 soldiers died. And then maybe 5-10 seconds later, he says 200 soldiers died or 200 people died. So I don't know if and that was in English. I don't know if that's a translation error. I don't know if he was including soldiers and civilians. I don't know if he was saying initially it was 100, but by the end it was 200. I don't know. So there are little things like that, but he does talk about the sonic boom or sonic spike weapon. It's very interesting. Now, again, it could still totally be propaganda, right? You could easily just have a Spanish guy speak propaganda. And then people go, I don't want to mess with the United States. They have these sonic weapons. Could be propaganda, but it does track with what we know of all of the. We always talk about black book projects. We always talk about secret technology. It's very common in conspiracy and UFO lore. And the way this guy talks about the U.S. forces is the same way you hear people talk about aliens in alien invasion movies. There's nothing we can do to stop them. Their technology is way too advanced. I would be scared to death if I was a world leader right now. I'd also be scared to death if I recently bought a Russian-made shoulder-launched missile. I'd be like, can I get my money back for this? Because that guy pulled the trigger and he blew up. I'd be really, really concerned right now because they can do this. And if I would, it wouldn't matter what country, if I would be terrified that they're going to do this to me. And it probably will. Again, it's shocking. I can't think of another time that, other than like Manuel Noriega, but again, that was like a 30-day siege. It was kind of like a Waco type of thing. Imagine being a world leader and going to bed and thinking, oh my God, Trump might kidnap me tonight. He's basically an international boogeyman. There's nothing like this has ever happened. Think about all the men, both on Iraqi side and American side, that had to die to get Saddam. All of that money, all of those lives. And be like, no, I'm just going to get you. I'm going to get you. And Trump's calling up Xi Jinping. He's like, who knows? I might be under your bed tonight. Crazy. Crazy stuff. And here's the thing. If this story is true, it's not even half the weaponry that we have access to. This was just the stuff that they said, we'll use it for this mission. Who knows what else they have out there? Sovereign, my battlefield friend. I'm going to toss you the keys of the world-famous Carpenter Copter. We're leaving behind Venezuela. Why don't you fly us all the way out to a haunted house in anywhere, USA? We show up at a haunted house. Everyone in town says this house is haunted, except for the people who live there. We go talk to the neighbors, and they're like, yeah, dude, it's crazy. It's so spooky there. I can't believe that family isn't freaking out constantly. In the middle of the night, you can hear someone walking up and down the hall when they're all asleep. They're like, how do you know they're all asleep? Oh, because I'm a pervert, and I spy on them while they're sleeping. And let me tell you, it's not me walking down the hallway. I'm outside their bedroom window. They're asleep. But there's sounds of people walking up and down the hallway. People who have gone over to this house, they go, yeah, they're really good friends of mine, but I hate staying there after 9 p.m. because the house... Like, you can hear something in the basement. It doesn't even sound like it's a person. Just something. And it just makes me super uneasy. I definitely never have to go down to the basement because I'm just a guest, but I don't even like being on the first floor of the house. You go, we gotta check this out. The family's not complaining. The friend goes, family? No, not really. Oh, okay. We're in this house, and we hear down in the basement, it's pretty creepy. Yeah. It's down there. Anyone have a sonic weapon they want to try to use against this ghost? And then all of a sudden we hear the sound of a bunch of kitchen cabinet doors slamming shut. And we go into the kitchen and all the doors are shut, but we can still hear a bam, 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 bam. Something's making a ton of noise in there. And then we hear a radio. And that's when we hear the unmistakable sign of a little girl giggling. And then we hear her say, ring around a rosy. Do you want to play a game? And I'm like, oh my God, this is the most haunted house ever. By the way, no, I don't want to play a game. I go, this is the most haunted house we've ever been in. And that's when we hear a car pull up and the people who own the house walk inside. And they find us there, and they're obviously shocked. They see Sovereign on the ground getting attacked by an invisible phantom. But I go, hey, so sorry we broke in your house. We were just ghost hunting. And that's when the dad looks at us and begins using sign language to communicate, get out of my house. I was like, well, we don't really speak sign language, but I know what that means. He's telling us to leave, or he's going to call the police. This is a really interesting hypothesis, story. I don't even really know how to suss it out, but it's going to take a crazy turn on this one. Someone posted online, and they said that they're deaf. Okay, someone posted online, Delane Woodall Hamlow posted this in the Gettysburg Paranormal Experiences Facebook group. And we're going to look at the paranormal phenomenon, how it relates to deaf people, in 3 different ways. And the first way is hers. She goes, I'm deaf, and I can sense ghosts. I can actually tell when spirits are around me. However, how do I communicate with them? She goes, I don't want to use a Ouija board, but I don't speak. I can't communicate through speech. If the ghost is, I know, it's really interesting questions, right? These are really fascinating. Been waiting to tell this story for a couple weeks. She goes, I want to communicate with ghosts, but if the ghosts don't understand... That gave me a heart attack. That was my alarm that's my alarm from 1999 with SR-71 playing. She goes, I want to communicate with them. I don't want to use a Ouija board. Will they understand what I'm saying if I use American Sign Language? And they don't know sign language. They were a hearing and speaking ghost while alive. Fascinating question. Fascinating question. With the UFO phenomenon, we've had multiple stories with people saying all over the world, I met aliens and I could instantly understand what they were saying and they could understand what I was saying. The language barrier as far as aliens go is just we chalk it up to the technology or the telepathy that aliens are using with humans. Do ghosts have that ability? Not really. Not really. Not that we know of. Some mediums may be able to communicate with the dead without speaking, just again, some sort of telepathy. But I think the rank and file person, me and you, I think all of us have hidden abilities that we haven't nurtured. I don't think mediums are born differently. I think they just are better at using a skill that we all have that most of us just shut off, either out of fear or ignorance that it even exists in the first place. Could someone who was Spanish, who spoke Spanish, communicate with a ghost who only spoke English? That in and of itself, the literature says, the lore says, not really. There's a lot of times where people will encounter ghosts and they don't understand what they're saying because it's in a different language. But at the same time, you've had people go to these haunted places in England or what have you and run into the ghost of, ghost of Queen Mary or what have you. Some woman who got her head chopped off 500 years ago, and they understand what she's saying, even though the way that they spoke would have been quite different. They hear the person going, help me, not, why thou knowest helpest me. Like Shakespeare stuff, right? You're like, Jason, they didn't actually talk like that, you buffoon. That's just the way that he wrote. You dost disbelieve me? So maybe you can, right? Maybe there are a lot of ghosts that actually don't speak English, but English speakers hear them speak English, so they assume they're an English-speaking ghost. Actually, now that I think about it, I'm trying to think of a time that someone's encountered a ghost of like a German and not understand what the guy says. There actually might be a auto-translator. I mean, if YouTube can do it, why can't the spirit world? That's interesting. Now that I think about it, I think all ghosts tend to speak the language of the person they're interacting with, which in and of itself is bizarre. Even the fact that ghosts are already bizarre enough. Now imagine it's not a spoken language, but a visual language like American Sign Language. Could someone who didn't speak at all use sign language to communicate with a ghost? And then, more importantly, would the ghost use sign language to speak back to the deaf person? Because now it's not just hearing the right language in your head. The ghost has to make a series of movements that would be interpreted by the living. I don't have an answer for that. It's a super good question. And it's something that I think would really need to be analyzed. You would need to have deaf ghost hunters do this. Now, there are deaf ghost hunters. There's one group called Silence Paranormal. And they hunt ghosts. And that brings up the second question. The first question is, can a ghost communicate with someone who's deaf? In the same way that a ghost could communicate with someone who speaks English. I don't have an answer for it. It's a fascinating question. I never ever considered it. I never even really considered the language barrier. I think most of the time because ghosts are local. Ghosts don't travel around like aliens do. They tend to be in the area where they died or where they loved the most or meant something to them or whatever. And generally the people who would reside in that area would also speak the language. The second question is, if you were deaf, how would you know ghosts were around? A visual ghost or a ghost moving an item, although that's depicted all the time in the media, that's the rarest kind of spirit. Most ghostly activity, at least the stuff that gets reported, is noises. Footsteps upstairs, doors opening and closing, things banging around. If you were deaf, you would completely miss out on all of that activity. And that does seem to be where a lot of ghostly activity stays. The noises. So how would you interact with that if you couldn't hear any of it? How would the ghost interact with you? If you're deaf, and it's trying to let itself be known. Interesting, right? Because obviously I have hearing, you probably have hearing, so we don't really think about that. But if you were deaf, and especially if you had a love for the paranormal, or if you were living in a house that the paranormal activity was actually hostile, you may miss out a big chunk of that. Hearing someone moaning in the basement, you just don't pick up on at all. By the time that it becomes a problem, by the time it's showing itself as an old man crouched down behind your dryer, it's kind of escalated. It's kind of escalated at that point. You could have gotten an exorcism or a blessing months ago, but you didn't hear any of that. It is interesting because, obviously a lot of people are talking about this online. The deaf community is varied, just like every other community, and you got a bunch of people who love ghost hunting and the paranormal who happen to be deaf. And people have said, I can sense it, that there's a sense that they can feel that may be more finely tuned than someone who can hear, because their body is, the body's compensating for abilities or senses that it doesn't have. And they go, I feel like I can feel the presence of the paranormal, maybe more than someone with hearing can. And that would be what I used. Also, it's very interesting, even though you're deaf, sound waves, they can feel sound waves moving. So the examples I use specifically, footsteps moving down the hallway, if it's heavy enough footstep, they may not hear anything, but they would feel the vibration if they were on the first floor and they were hearing someone stomping on the second floor when no one was up there. They might actually pick up on the vibration, which again would give them a heads up. Something's wrong in this house. But it's still an interesting question. Imagine you were a ghost and you wanted to interact with someone. You wanted to scare them. A lot of ghosts like to do things scary because being dead is scary to them. They're passing on that pain. We covered that story. I'll put that episode in the show notes. But if you were a ghost and you were trying to communicate or let your presence be known and someone couldn't hear, it's an interesting question. So we have, would a ghost speak sign language to someone who didn't have hearing? Fascinating. I mean, I've never even thought about that before. Would they talk telepathically? I mean, that probably not. I don't know. The second question, I think, is a little more. I think a ghost would, if it was trying to make itself known, either it was a loved one who's passed on or a vengeful spirit trying to scare people in the house, I think it would adapt to what it needed to do. I think it would either, I'm not saying it would go, that's it, I'm just going to show up at the foot of their bed, because again, it seems there has to be a power ramp for these spirits. It doesn't seem like they can just instantly come back. We had that one story where the guy killed himself in front of his girlfriend, and she instantly saw his soul, his ghost, standing over his own dead body, and this ghost had a look of shock and horror on its face, and then he flashed away. That might be the fastest ghost we've ever covered on this show. Instant, and it was there for just a heartbeat. He was there to look down at his own body after he shot himself in the head with that look on his face like, oh my God, what did I do? And then he's gone. That's very rare for a ghost to be able to show up that quickly. It would probably have to make sure it was making noises that could be sensed through vibration. But it'd be interesting, like how many stories have we covered and how many stories don't I not cover? How many stories have I not covered because it's so common? People saying running water. I was in my house and I heard running water upstairs bathroom, and I went up there and the sink was on full blast. If you were deaf, of course, eventually you're going to find out your water's on full blast, but you're not going to find it instantly. Or the radio that turns on late at night in the back of the attic that doesn't have any batteries. These are things that people encounter with hauntings that may be completely missed by someone who's deaf. I would think that if the spirit wanted to communicate, it would make noises that were very vibration-based, i.e. stomping on the stairs, but it might not be able to. It might not be at that power level yet. But then there's an even more interesting question that came up. And this one I think is probably going to be the one that a lot of you guys are going to... It's not controversial, but it might be. We talked about how would ghosts communicate with someone who's deaf, how someone who was deaf would communicate with a ghost. I also want to say this too, they do have a device known as the Ovilus. It's basically, this is fascinating, it's a spirit box. It's $600 too, so don't get your hopes up. I mean, I don't know, that might be chump change for you, but it's a $600 spirit box that not only does the radio changing thing, like a ordinary spirit box where it just scans radio stations, and the ghost, the theory is the ghost can pick out words from random radio stations and it'll deliver a message. I'm at home. You know, it's scanning across these different radio stations. The Ovilus will also allow a ghost to randomly pick words from a loaded dictionary on the device. And the way that it's said is that the device is used to pick up environmental changes, and it translates those environmental changes into computer patterns or binary code or whatever words, and then those words appear on your Ovilus. So the words it would pick out from the dictionary are home. So it's kind of the same message as the spirit box. Does it work? I don't know. I've never heard of this thing before. Some people swear by them. I was looking them up online. Who knows? I'm not going to say that it's a hunk of junk. I've never used it. I'm not going to say it's the best thing ever. I've never used it. But it is out there. And someone was saying that's how this woman, what was her name again? Delan, who asked the question, she's deaf and she wants to communicate with ghosts. They go, you could try that, right? If it works, a ghost could communicate that way. An interesting thing, though, and this is how we're going to wrap it up. Someone had the question online. They go, if a deaf person dies, is their ghost deaf? Now, you go, Jason, that's kind of a simple question. Of course not. If they're deaf, okay, hold on, don't, let me finish. Because I know, let me finish. If a deaf person dies, is the ghost deaf? You say, of course not. Of course not. That's a physical ailment. Whether it was caused by some sort of damage to the hearing or to the ears or the brain, or they were born that way, whether it was a genetic thing. It's a physical issue. And the man who has cancer does not have cancer as a ghost. The man who got blown to bits in the dynamite factory, his ghost is not blown to bits. He's a normal, all put together guy. People get crushed by steamrollers, their ghost isn't a pancake. I mean, listen, we're talking about Beetlejuice. Of course not, it's a physical problem. Would a blind person be a blind ghost? No, that's a physical problem. And outside, of course, we have ghosts that they had a peg leg in the real world or while they were alive, and then now at their house in New England, you can still hear the sound of one foot and one peg leg hitting the hardwood floor, sometimes late on moonless nights. We do think that that's fascinating because is that a recording of a ghost? Or is that guy's actual soul trapped? Probably a recording of a ghost. That's why it's making that noise. We also have reports of headless horsemen. We have reports of soldiers in the Civil War who were blown to bits by a cannonball and their ghost shows up bloodied with a crutch going, anyone seen my head? Or any other part of me? All it is an arm and a crutch. So some ghosts do carry their physical ailments over, or the way that they died over. That's true. It's not the most common. Most ghosts, the people are whole, despite how they died. Hanging ghosts appear to be hanging still. Headless ghosts very often appear. Like if you lost your head while you were alive, you may appear as a headless ghost, but again, that's not super common. A lot of people die in a lot of gruesome ways, and their ghost appears to be normal. Especially if it's not just a recording. So would this is a really fascinating question. Would a deaf person, while they were alive, they're deaf, when they died, would they have hearing? I don't know. You go, what are you talking about? No, Jason, you just listed all these examples. It's not like they're the headless horsemen. This is what's so fascinating to me. It's a simple question, and a lot of people go, well, of course not. When the guy posted this question online, people go, of course not. Of course they'd be hearing in the afterlife. When I went to college, you had to take a second language. I have a tongue that's too small. I cannot roll my R's. Obviously, anyone who's listened to this podcast for any amount of time knows I have a hard time pronouncing a lot of things. I had a speech impediment as a child. It took years of speech therapy to make it so people could understand what I was saying. I cannot speak Spanish. I have tried. I cannot roll my R's. I have a tiny tongue. But you need a second language in college. So I took American Sign Language. And I was conversational for a long time. I was actually really good at it. It played to my strengths. Very visual, very physical language. And when you learn sign language, when you're really immersed in the American Sign Language like that, what's fascinating is you learn something about the deaf community that I was never a part of, obviously. But you can't really learn American Sign Language without learning about the deaf community. It is very, very controversial in the deaf community to want to hear. We're not broken. There's nothing wrong with us. There's nothing to cure. The deaf community, it's fascinating. There's a documentary, and it's so funny because I've been waiting to tell this story. I wanted to watch the documentary first. I've been waiting years to watch this documentary. This documentary was lost media for a long time. It's Academy Award nominated. And you couldn't find a copy of it. Now it's on streaming. I found that out like a week or two ago, and I'm going to watch it. But I really wanted to tell this story. I'll let you know more after I watch it, but I know what the documentary is about. It's called Sound and Fury. And basically, it's a documentary about the deaf community and families that are deaf. You have the grandparents are deaf, parents are deaf, kids are deaf. It's about whether or not to get a cochlear implant so you'll be able to hear. And it tears these families apart.
A hearing person really can't understand how you could be happy if your child is born deaf.
Why is it so important to be deaf? Yes, deaf people have beautiful language, but you miss out on so many other beautiful things in the world, like music.
I don't care about music. I can't hear it.
I really am happy being deaf. It's very peaceful. Who would want to change that?
Why do you want a cochlear implant now?
Because I want to hear everything.
Forget deaf. You are a mother first and you're a father first. You do what's right for that child. Grandma, she says, I want to communicate. This is what she says.
I never knew that you really didn't accept deafness until now.
If I
Heather is my child, and I am not being close-minded. Hearing people have their own way of looking at things. I have a deaf family. That is my life.
Tears them apart. Like I said, I haven't seen the documentary, but I've read about it for years. You could not find a copy of it for a long, long time. I remember when it came out, people were shocked. They're like, wait, there's a discussion over whether or not you want to hear? Of course you want to hear. Everybody wants to hear. Tears these families apart. The grandparents go, she doesn't need to hear. This is our community. Parents go, well, we kind of want her to be able to hear. She wants to hear. Tears these families apart. It's about that struggle, about that decision. To anyone who hears, you would go, well, of course, if all of a sudden I lost my hearing in some sort of industrial accident, I want my hearing restored. And everyone else would too. It's kind of just a ridiculous question. Who would want to be a deaf ghost? I would agree with that statement, right, if I didn't know about that ongoing issue in the deaf community. If your entire culture and your entire community is based around a shared aspect, and then someone says we can remove that aspect from you, I mean, like, how would anyone take that? And you go, but Jason, they can't hear. We can make it so they can hear. It would honestly be the equivalent if we somehow invented a machine that would turn people of any race into any other race. You say, you know what? We can take this black guy and we can make him white, genetically white. He'll have the same soul, the same brain, but everything else about him will be unmistakably a white guy. Who wouldn't want to be white? You say. Not me, I didn't say that. And don't clip that. People would go, rightfully so, they'd go, first off, you'd be like, really? That technology sounds pretty insane. Sounds like something from Mission Impossible or a Caracas raid. But then you would go, well, you don't need to cure blackness. And you go, but yeah, you're really making an argument for this. You go, well, all of the like oppression and all of like the over-policing and all of this stuff, we can get rid of it. We can turn all the black people into white people, and then we don't have to worry about racism or anything like that. And obviously it'd be a huge debate. People would be like, there's nothing to cure. There's nothing to cure. You have black people, Hispanic people, Irish people, Jewish people. We're going to cure them next. We're going to turn everybody white. People, rightfully so, would say, no, there's nothing to cure. And then you go, okay, I'll put that device away. But look at this one. I can restore hearing to all the deaf people in the world. People go, okay, now that's an invention I can get behind. But the deaf community, they don't want it. Some of them do, sure. That's what makes the debate, right? It's not that none of them want it. It's that some of them do. But imagine you're a member of the deaf community. Your family's deaf. You went to a deaf school. You attend deaf functions. This is your culture. The same way if any ethnic group can identify with that ethnic group and say, Irish pride, this is who I am. And then someone invents a machine that makes you no longer Irish. And that's this debate. In the movie, the kid goes, I don't want to be Irish anymore. He doesn't actually say that. Says, I don't want to be deaf anymore. But you know what I mean? It's the same thing. We don't think of it that way. I never would have thought about it that way had I not ever heard of this documentary. Had I not ever learned American Sign Language. Because you would go, of course they want to hear. Who wouldn't want to hear? But your entire culture is based around that. And they go, there's nothing wrong with it. We can communicate perfectly well with the rest of the world. So to say that someone who is deaf while they are alive becomes a hearing ghost, the ghost who has its hearing, deeply offensive, honestly. There's a lot of members of the deaf community who would find that outrageously offensive. And here's the thing, you could say that, you could go, they cannot like it, but that's the way it's going to happen. But we don't know, actually. We don't know if when a deaf person dies, the ghost can now hear. I cannot think of any example I've ever come across with any of this. So we honestly don't know. Maybe they do remain deaf as a ghost, because that is who they were while they were alive. It was everything about them. It was their culture. It was their friends. It was their community. It was who they were and how they felt, the same way people feel about their own ethnic group. There's nothing to cure about being Italian. There's nothing to cure about being Palestinian. There's nothing to cure about anything like that. That's how the deaf community feels about themselves and hearing. Now, honestly, I don't know if there's a corollary with it to the blind community. I don't know if there are people who are blind and they're like, I love being blind and I hang out with other blind people and this is how I identify myself. If it hadn't been for that documentary, I never would have even thought. And I read an article about the documentary when it came out decades ago, and it blew me away because I just assumed everyone who was deaf wanted to hear. Why not? It's fantastic. But it takes away a core part of their identity. And from what we understand with ghost lore, how you perceive yourself plays a huge part in how your ghost appears. That's why there are no fat ghosts. We talked about that. I've done speeches on that, presentations on that. I'll put that episode in the show notes. That's why sometimes ghosts do show up covered in bloody bandages, missing a head. Because the shock of their death was so intense, they're having a hard time wrapping their head, no pun intended, around the idea of not having one. They're kind of like lost in this confused state. But most ghosts who die of cancer don't look like end-stage cancer ghosts. They look like they did when they were healthy. A deaf person perceives themselves as being deaf. That is part of their culture, their community. That's part of who they are. If that is how they perceive themselves, it is very, very likely their ghost will be deaf as well. And to even insinuate that it's not, that's not true, they will have hearing, deeply offensive to that culture. Now, I'm not one who goes, I don't ever want to offend people. That's the reason why I'm taking this tack. That's not why I'm taking this tack. Really, I'm taking this because we don't know. I can't think of a time that we've ever even read about a deaf ghost. A ghost using sign language to talk to someone who speaks English and can hear. So we don't know if the hearing would return. Fascinating. It's such a simple question. And it is not a simple answer. I love doing this show. I love absolutely doing this show because where else would I be able to talk about this stuff, right? Where else would I have you sitting back, listening to it, and getting your feedback? Shoot me up. Don't shoot me up. Hit me up on my email, on YouTube comments and all that stuff. Fascinating show. I love doing this show. Fascinating topic. And actually, let me say this real quick. There may not be an episode tomorrow. I had some stuff come up, an emergency thing an emergency came up. May not be an episode tomorrow. But I really do love doing this show. And it's because of stuff like this. We get to kind of ponder and discuss these things. Questions I never would have considered before. And now I've really been thinking about it for the past couple of weeks. I'm going to watch that documentary, Sound and Fury. I really wanted, and I'll put the link for it. It's streaming now. For years, you just couldn't find it. I'll put a link for it in the show notes. I plan on watching it this week. And maybe we'll do a follow-up. Maybe we'll even do a Dead Rabbit Radio recommends. I don't know. But very, very interesting stuff. And I'll put some articles about the documentary as well. So if you don't have time to watch it, there'll be articles in the show notes. But simple question, seemingly simple question, right? But a very, very complicated one. And it may be one that we'll never have the answer to. I've never encountered or never read about a deaf ghost before. So who knows? Maybe their hearing is restored, but if that's the case, it's almost like a curse. That's the last thing a lot of people in the deaf community would ever want. But would you also want to be a deaf ghost forever? I mean, interesting question. I love doing this show. I love it. deadrabbitradio@gmail.com is going to be our email address. You can also hit us up at facebook.com/deadrabbitradio. TikTok is @deadrabbitradio. Dead Rabbit Radio is the daily paranormal, conspiracy, and true crime podcast. You don't have to listen to it every day, but I'm glad you listened to it today. Have a great one.